Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Indoor Air Quality Affects Allergies. I am Troy Raszka, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Pure Air Control Services Incorporated. And with me today is Dr. Rajiv Sahay, who is the Director of our Environmental Diagnostics Laboratory.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to all of our participants. As Troy said, we are going to discuss about the indoor air quality and the allergy. It's going to be funful and it's going to be a lot of good information. And so do you have any question or any comment, you can always send us through the chatting, which is activated on our platform.
Yes, thank you very much, Doc. So today we're going to cover some basic as it relates to indoor air quality and allergies. And so today this is the overview of our objectives of what we're going to cover.
Well, this webinar is about the allergy, but it is in a special reference to indoor air quality. So it is very essential to have an understanding of indoor environmental quality and indoor air quality. We will be also discussing what is allergy and allergens, because a lot of people need to understand the difference between the two. And obviously the source is one of the most important and vital component of the whole equation. So we need to also find out that what are the typical source of these allergens. We'll also focus on what common symptom you start experiencing, so that we start talking about allergy. Well, allergens and IAQ, what kind of in indoor air quality situation, what kind of allergens are predominant. And then we will be also outlining the testing method, what you can do to test these. And obviously a very frequently asked query is that how bad is bad, how good is good. So we will be also touching on that, and of course we'll summarize the whole presentation.
Yes, thanks, Doc. So to get started, it's essential that we understand the difference between indoor environmental quality and indoor air quality, right? So when we look and discuss indoor environmental quality, that's looking at the indoor environment as a whole. So as you see on this slide, the definition for indoor air quality is that it's a term referring to the suitability of the built environment as it relates to the comfort, safety, and health of the occupants in a building. So if you think about all of the things that go into the indoor environment, everything from building materials to finishing materials, furniture, the ventilation system, but then other things like perhaps water features and plant or landscaping features. All of this can affect the entire environment of the built or indoor environment, so as a whole. But when we look at indoor air quality, Doc, right, we're just looking at what the air quality is like within the built environment.
Yes, it can be understood in a very good way that indoor environmental quality, when you refer that term, it talks about all kind of condition perpetuating in and around a building. Whereas when you exclusively talk about the air and especially the quality of air, that what is the pure air or what is not the pure air or what is the contaminated air, then that relates to the indoor air quality. So actually it can be defined as a quality within and around a building, especially as it relates to the comfort and health of a building occupant in terms of air. So that is the air quality, and air quality should be precise. We can breathe, and breathing is one of the very vital component of life. You can go several days without food, few hours without water, but hardly few minutes without air, right? So it is very, very important that we should pay attention on the quality of the air. That is the one component of this presentation. I hope our all viewers or the audience is understand so far what is the environmental quality and the air quality.
So with that fundamental understanding of how the environment of a building can affect the air, and the air
can affect the environment, so vice versa. Now it is very essential to understand that what is our understanding about the allergies, because typically if someone is a start doing some kind of extraordinary symptom, people start thinking what is going on, whether it is infection, disease, or allergy. So at this time I deem necessary that we should give a precise definition of allergy for the better understanding of the topic. Then an allergy is a chronic condition which is basically involving an abnormal reaction to an ordinary harmless substance called as allergen. So in other words, that you get exposed towards some kind of foreign substance which we are calling as allergen, and we'll define allergen a little bit more in depth in our coming slides. So that is typically called as allergy. But let me give you in my next slide the definition of allergen. So allergen is nothing but allergens are the substances upon which someone who is especially susceptible is going to react. So these substances can be of a biological in nature or can be biological in origin. And especially when these substances start distributing through the air, they are called as aeroallergen. Isn't that make sense? Because aero meaning something related with the air, and allergen, which is like obviously allergy causing substance. So if some allergy causing substance is distributed through the air, that becomes simply the aeroallergens. As I promised that I'll give you some good example in coming slide that what is the aeroallergens and what we typically deal with when we think about the indoor environment.
Right, we're just getting started at this point of the webinar to give you guys a fundamental understanding of what we're talking about here. And of course, Doc, many people are probably familiar with what's known as seasonal allergies, hay fever, or people that are susceptible to ragweed. And while they're similar, the type of allergic reactions that we experience in a building may or may not be affected by seasonal conditions.
Correct.
So as you know, that through our correspondence with you all, we're going to ask a series of questions, and it's time for our first question. If you answer 4 or more of our 5 questions right, then you're eligible for a Starbucks gift card. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the first question right now. And it is, what does IAQ stand for? So is that indoor allergen quality, indoor air quality, or inside allergy quotient? So I'm going to distribute that right now.
Yeah, we can always compute the answer. So I hope many of you have answered that one. And Troy, why don't you make a note like who is doing the right? So what we can do, we will be sending an email that who has done what. Like as Troy said, that some of you is going to receive some gift card of the Starbucks, isn't that?
That's correct.
Yeah, so if it is that, you will be getting an email from us. So please go on the next slide.
Okay, so we're back. And now we'll talk a little bit more in depth about allergen sources. So what are the sources of these allergens that we can find not only in a building, but maybe outside or in our homes?
Exactly, because sitting here in the laboratory, we get like a lot of customers simply asking that, hey, where the sources of these allergies coming? And as a matter of fact, the customer really want to know the source of allergy causing substance, both biological and abiological in origin. So some of the common source, it is like is very common sense approach. You look around your surrounding, you will find many of the sources distributed very like commonly in the place of where we are living or place of occupancy. So first thing I want to really draw attention of our audience is that the animal or pet they are going to be one of the source. I'm not saying they are bad, but we need to keep them in order to avoid the emission of allergy or allergenic source. When I say animal or pets, that if you look in around our surrounding, lot of people have, like, birds, cat, cow, dog, roaches, rodents, etc. as a pet, and that can be, like, a good source of allergy. Now, a lot of people have seen that they don't feel very comfortable if they get exposed to some kind of fiber, maybe cellulotic fiber or other man-made fiber like a rayon, etc. Then the food also a very big component of the whole allergy equation, because that can be a very good source, such as dairy, egg, and nuts. These are few thing I'm just listing, is like, known for emitting, like, various kind of allergen, and susceptible person get, like, the allergenic symptom upon exposure. Such allergy can also be initiated with the insect-based source, such as dust mite, cockroaches, and others are very, frequently and commonly, if the housekeeping is not ordered, is going to be recorded from the indoor environment.
Right. So a lot of our audience members today, and of course what we with Pure Air Control Services and ED Lab deal with are commercial or industrial buildings, schools, courthouses, and a lot of folks might think, well, geez, I'm not bringing my pet to work with me, my cat or my dog, but is it true that someone that, let's say, has a lot of cats, that could bring that dander or that fur in on their clothing, and it could be distributed into an office environment or to a school environment?
Yeah, I have a very interesting story to share, because in the laboratory one time we received like a sample, and all the samples, I'm talking about the air, surface, and the liquid sample from that facility turning negative, but still people were complaining that, like, no, I'm suffering, I'm having a symptom of continuous wheezing, coughing, headache, etc. So our industrial hygienists start, like, doing inch by inch survey and collecting sample, and we actually fail to, like, isolate or detect anything which like correlate with the symptom. But guess what, the breakthrough come one day, because our industrial hygienist, like, show up at the workplace very early, and somehow or the other he has start taking sample from the people who start, like, checking for the work. And then all of a sudden we have luck, because we did find that a lady in that office, the secretary, was having some, like, pet and a cat, and basically when she comes, she used to unfur all the pet on her clothing and etc. And obviously that is being, like, sorted on her table, working table, from where our industrial hygienist collected finally some dander, and the sample turned positive for the cat allergen. And that was the key, that was the whole equation, just, like, revolve around, and finally we get the breakthrough by just, like, linking that case through the allergy. So many a time whatever happen is like seen but not seen. That's why we are here, here to help. So that pretty fascinating. We were also surprised that every facility was so clean, but we had that kind of situation. On the other hand, there is other allergy sources that, like, such as latex, mold, pollen grain, and other organic and inorganic substance. It can be allergenic, because it really depends upon the immunity of the individual, because the allergy is two-part equation. One, that how someone is reacting against that, and the other thing is that how crucial or how potent that substance which is going to disturb your physiological or metabolic activity. That's why you experience the accelerated and opposite or altered reaction in your body. So that is the another source. The pollen grains are always linked with the seasonality, because in some season, like especially in the early spring season, like, there is lot of pollen and copious amount of pollen in the environment. So upon exposure, again, with the susceptible personnel, you will be getting, like, a lot of symptoms. You will visualize those symptoms, and people suffer terribly with that.
So now that we've looked at a few of the different allergen sources, some of the common sources for allergies. We're going to take a look at, how do we come in contact with these, or how are these put in contact with us that it starts to trigger these reactions. So when we look at exposure routes to these allergens, the first one that comes to mind with regard to aeroallergens especially is that we inhale these. We're breathing these allergens in, and it's affecting us in our nasal cavities, our upper respiratory system, and then it can also get more deeply into our lungs. So inhalation is probably one of the biggest for indoor air quality.
Yeah, it's a inhalation is like, basically dominant any other method of exposure route to the allergen, because inhalation let the allergen have a chance to get inside your body, and then it start reacting with the mast cell or other cell, and it can go deeper in the lungs, and that it irritates, and that's why you get the allergenic symptom. But nevertheless, some of the allergens are like, potent enough that if you come in contact with them, that they will be accelerating through just like, getting your exposure through the skin or your outer layer. And not very commonly, but obviously most of the food allergy, especially I would like to say, is due to the ingestion, because if you eat something, then you get the symptom because it get penetrated to your system, and then it start like altering your regular metabolic activity, and that what you experience in terms of allergy, because body try to reject those foreign particles from your whole body system, and that turns in allergenic symptoms.
Yes, that's true. So we're looking at what we can breathe through the air, what we touch on the surfaces that we come into contact with, and then what we actually eat or drink that could cause some issues. So some of the common symptoms, is Doc started touching on just now, are headaches, nasal congestion, so stuffy nose, you can't breathe, or on the opposite, a drippy nose or runny nose where it's causing you to sneeze a lot, wheezing, shortness of breath, again, upper respiratory, your bronchial tubes are constricting, so you can't breathe.
As I said, that like, you start coughing, your body is trying to reject, your body is trying to eject all those from your body system, so you will be experiencing coughing. Many a time you might have noticed that you have a itchy sensation or redness on your skin, like high bump, etc. That also like a very common symptom. And then the fatigue. You won't be believing that a lot of people, sometimes we think that they are just talking, but believe me that those people who suffer really from allergy feel really fatigued, like they have a weakness all the time. They don't want to be working, they want to take like rest, they are not exciting, the passion is gone. So that kind of fatigueness is also sometimes related with the allergen or allergy. And then the nausea and vomiting is the another common system. And we have also noticed, or we have received complaint that people also get fever, and the feverish symptom is not related with any infection or any disease, but simply it is due to the allergy, because your metabolic system is not working good.
Exactly. So that brings us to our second question, our second poll question, before we really dive into the indoor air quality aspect of how these allergens are distributed, where they are found in a building. And we will launch this question. It's an easy one. And anyway, so what we are talking about here is man-made fibers can be an allergen source. So that's a true or false question. Man-made fibers can be a source for allergens. So we'll get
so just like this question is just like yes and no kind of question. If you agree, just say yes. If you don't agree or you don't believe that that can cause allergy, you say no. So I believe that our audience received that, so we need to close this poll and we keep moving to the next slide.
100% got it right. So that's excellent. All right, let's continue the presentation, and we're going to dive right into the indoor air quality aspect and sort of the anatomy of a building, and so how this sort of works inside of the built environment.
Yeah, so built environment, like, especially in the era of energy conservation, everybody is trying to conserve the energy for better of environment, and there is a lot of related aspect. But at the same time, when we taken control of the natural ventilation in the building and replaced with man-made ventilation, then there is a lot of precaution need to be taken, because it is having something called as a stacking effect. So it means that the air inside the building is basically controlled, or the ventilation is totally controlled by the mechanical system. If you compare it with the old days, building a structure, that it was mostly influenced by the outdoors, so the ventilation was controlled naturally. So the benefit of this, that you can have a better comfortable environment of living, because you are maintaining the humidity, temperature, etc. But downside of it, that once allergenic substance or any kind of bug get penetrated in the building, then it is going to be in the airflow, and it will be keep circulating. And obviously, if it is being not, because fresh air intake is very minimal in those kind of buildings, just to manage the ventilation, they have a fresh air intake, and the exhaust is also not in a way like in natural total exchange of air, that never happened. So the chances of retaining allergen in that built environment is greater, and some point of time, if you expose yourself to those allergens, obviously you're going to experience the allergenic symptoms.
No, that's correct. I mean, if you think about it, and I'm just 50 years old, I mean, most buildings now don't allow you to open the windows anymore. Most modern office buildings or modern schools, they're not bringing fresh air in through windows. It's happening through the HVAC system. However, if the building envelope is out of balance and there's infiltration into the building beyond opening and coming in and out of doors, but weather stripping is not good, there's holes in the roof, these kind of situations, outdoor allergen sources can come into the building that way as well. And as we talked earlier, on people's clothing, and people can actually bring in some of these allergen sources. So when we talk about the building, we'll zoom in a little bit here, and we'll look at some high-risk areas where we can find these allergens.
Yeah, actually, the very high-risk area, I really want to focus one thing, that is the HVAC. The HVAC is nothing but heating ventilation system of a building. So in other words, it's the air conditioning system, if you understand in that way. Because what happened, if the air goes through, goes for the conditioning, then that can bring also a lot of dust and debris and mold, spore, and pollen and whatnot. If it is being taken from outside, then these are going to pass through the fin and the coil in the system, meaning in the air handler. And then what happened, if the humidity is not maintained properly, or the airflow is just going to downstream, that it can carry all these substances which I mentioned to the livable space. And as I said you, that these buildings are not being controlled, or the ventilation is being not controlled by the natural phenomena. So the chances are that there's these in transported materials are going to be in the building for a long time, and some point of time you will be getting the exposure. The other area in the building, that's the carpet. Because the carpet or carpeted area is basically whatever is coming in the air, some point of time it is going to settle on those carpet. And obviously, if you walk on the carpet, you release those materials, or sometimes you touch or come direct in contact with the carpet, then you can also get direct exposure. Likewise, if you go towards the working area or working bench, if you're talking about the the offices building and the workplaces, then you can see if the housekeeping is not done properly, then there is a lot of deposition of the nuisance dust, and nuisance dust is reservoir of all kind of allergen. You can get from mold spore to pollen grain to various kind of insects, including mite, etc. And it is needless to say that if you get exposed to any of those, and if you are susceptible, then you are going to show the symptom. So these are some very commonly high risk area within the building.
So the HVAC system, the units, the ducts, the registers, desktop surfaces, the carpet, all of these things become a place where these allergen sources can reside.
Exactly, and one more thing I want to emphasize, that the building usage changes. So sometimes you see that one building used to be a big mall, now that become the reservoir, warehouse, and sometimes in the warehouse they are converting into the mall. So what happened that if there is an allergenic load and it is being not removed properly before changing, or the building use changes, then if those allergens are there, and then it poses some risk. So we need to do that before we do that kind of practices. We assess it and we fully address those. And that's why I want to say that another thing is that, like, the very first thing go in building, if the beds are tight, that they start cutting building budget or budgetary provision to cleanliness of the building. So in other words, it is called as deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance in terms of like housekeeping, in terms of HVAC maintenance, in terms of the plumbing maintenance. So all these accumulate, and all these can be a source where you will knowingly or unknowingly, throwing allergens and throwing people at risk.
Exactly. So as we look at IAQ and how the indoor air quality or the environment of the building affects allergens, just to recap: building tightness, energy efficiency, building use changes, even product technology changes, a different fan gets put on an HVAC system. Again, deferred maintenance where budgets are cut, and so now you have less housekeeping, or you're not cleaning the ducts, you're not changing the filters in your HVAC system as regularly. And then, of course, the HVAC system itself is both a source and a distribution point for the allergies. So you can see how this would affect some of you in the audience. The building use change, for example. Doc brought up a very good example. Even here in Tampa Bay area, we're seeing big warehouse or industrial spaces being turned into like these food courts with different restaurants and such in them. So, we would hope that if you're a general contractor out there, that, you would have an assessment done before, during, and when you're ready to open the new facility or have it commissioned, that would take a look at these kind of things, do some indoor air quality testing, take a look, as Doc said, at the allergen load of the building. But going off of the HVAC system as both a source and distribution point, we look at that area of impact, which is essentially the evaporator coil.
Yes, in the evaporator coil, I guess many of you are aware that there are several different components, such as fin and coil. These are, I don't want to use jargon, but in other words, there is a very thin metallic plates enfolded and packed in the air handler unit or in the coil. So if you can just look on that, the total area of that fin which is packed inside or per square inch in that particular air handler, you will be totally surprised that how bigger area is that for the incubation of various microbe or accumulation of dust and debris, including pollen, etc. And then once the air pass through those coils, that kind of go with the current of air and go to the building or in the usable space, and there all kind of symptoms start flourishing.
No, that's exactly right. And so many of you might be thinking, well, hey, I change my filters regularly, and so therefore my coils should stay pretty clean. And again, that might be true, but you have to make sure that the filters are fit properly, that there's no infiltration into the mechanical room, the air handler unit, the ductwork, because these allergen sources are very small, they're microscopic, and they can fit through very small spaces. On the flip side of that, you're operating under deferred maintenance, you're trying to stretch your filter changes out, your filters get dirty, guess what? That causes resistance, that puts negative pressure into the air handler unit, and now any place that air can flow besides the filter is going to become a slipstream for these kind of allergens to get into the coil and then be blown through the rest of the building. So now it's time for another question, and I'll open that up, and that is, how does the HVAC affect allergens? It is a source for allergens. It can distribute the allergens throughout a building, or it's both a source and distribution point.
So I hope that we have discussed, so our audience are intelligent. They are going to answer this question, and you get about 5 to 10 seconds more, and the poll is going to be closed shortly here. If you haven't responded as yet, please go ahead and respond it, and I believe that the time is up, so we are going to close.
We got a few more coming in. There we go. People are changing their answers. They're thinking about it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close it. And it looks like most of you got it right. 89% said that the HVAC system can be both a source and a distribution point for the allergies. So good job on that question. So, now that we know what allergen sources are, we know how the building operates and how they can come into and linger in a building and where they're found within the building. What can we do to determine how serious of a problem or issue these allergens can be? And so when we start seeing occupants report complaints, and it might be one person or two people, okay, well, maybe there's something else going on. Maybe they're allergic to the outside and the symptoms are continuing on them. But when there's 2 or 3 people, or when the people leave the office or the school and feel better at home or outside and come back to the building and start to feel bad again, then you might have an issue in your building. So how do you go about finding these sources of allergens? And I want to make a point here, Doc, and you can build on this, and that is when you think of someone like Dr. Sahay or our industrial hygienists that work in our building sciences division, we're like the building doctor. We're not people doctors. So when we are talking about allergies or these issues affecting people, we want to find out what's happening in the building. We can't diagnose people.
Yeah, so that's correct. So there are twofold approach for that. Like, one approach which we suggest that unless and until the problem is very severe, you can do something to know the content or the allergenic substance which is in your building. That is called as do it yourself IAQ, meaning indoor air quality testing. Is very few simple steps. You need to collect the sample, you send it to the laboratory, and laboratory will perform analysis on it and make you aware that what you are dealing with, which obviously I'll give you some example. Now in the second phase is like a little bit more technical, where you require professional help. That's why we call it professional IAQ testing. In that particular practices, some industrial hygienist or some trained professional visit people's building where the complaint was received or is filed by the occupants. Then there these professionals go with their various kind of tool and instruments and start collecting sample. For an example, they may collect the bulk sample, which is either a gram of dust or some kind of wooden plank or office stationery, various furniture, etc. They can collect the sample from there. They can also make some swab sample, which is basically they will select the swab of the complaint area and then they will swab it, and they will be collecting that as a swab sample. If there is some other problem which is related with the water and stuff, then they can also collect the liquid sample. And liquid sample, they will collect an aliquot of the liquid, and they can bring it as a bulk sample. On the other hand, they can collect the air sample by using various kind of air sampler, and there is a test methodology called as a spore trap analysis, in which they can just collected the specimen are tested under the laboratory by using either microscopy or culture method, and by which it is being determined that either any biological or abiological substance is there which might be problematic.
So when we're talking about these sampling methods, and we're moving through some of these very quick, if you were on our mold webinar, that's the very similar topic that we talked to. But these do-it-yourself test kits, are basically light versions of what these professionals are going to use. And the various kits, depending on what you're testing for, you're primarily looking at air and surface samples. So you're going to take and have a very consumer level spore trap or an impactor and take those samples, send them to our laboratory, and they'll do the analysis on it. Whereas our professional industrial hygienists are going to use much more sophisticated versions of that equipment to do their swabbing, their tape lifts, surface sampling, and then of course these very sophisticated methods to do air sampling. So when we talk about the kind of samples that we come back into the lab with, Doc, and we hit on this earlier when we talked about sort of the basic definition of what an allergen is. There's two different types. There's abiogenic and then biogenic. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here with the abiogenic samples?
The abiogenic samples are mostly like, having various kind of chemicals such as volatile organic chemical, carbon monoxide, etc. Those are like, the common one, which is typically recorded from the indoor environment. Then you have fibers, and the nuisance dust. That is a whole lot of another world, because nuisance dust incorporate both organic as well as inorganic material that can be allergenic. There are several others abiogenic stuff which can be dead plant material, dead animal material, etc. that can be also make it to the indoor environment, and that can be also serve as an allergen. On the contrary to that, we have a biogenic allergen, which is obviously many of you are aware that the mold or the fungal spores can serve as a typical biogenic allergen. It can also be distributed through the air, so it's called as bioallergens. And then beside that, you can have various kind of organic and inorganic material in the air, such as you have skin cell. That sometimes people have a skin cell allergy that is being shedded by the dweller itself. Then we have the dust mite, which sometimes the poop of the dust mite can easily aerosolize, and that can also serve as an allergen. So these are some good examples of the biogenic substance. Beside that, you can also see various kind of insect biodetritus, or the part of the insects such as wing, their mouth part, etc. Then you have various pollen grain, which can be the result of the infiltration, or sometimes people have indoor plants, so some of the plant can produce pollen, so it can be indoor generator or the source of the allergen. And then obviously the plant trichome, which is basically the fiber which is growing, or in other words, plant trichome is defined as the aerial growth or hair which grow on the aerial part of the plant is the plant trichome. So in other words, this is a special type of fiber which we generate on the plant surfaces and come in the air due to the trampling, meaning rubbing against to the leaf surfaces or the flower surfaces, and that they set free in the air, and that's why they become airborne, and that is a very good category of biogenic allergen.
Someone might have decorative landscaping in the lobby of their office, and people are coming and going, and they brush against it, and this releases into the air where people start breathing it. I do want to mention that on these slides that we're looking at, these are actual photographs that you took through your microscope. So this is part of our microscopy, if you can pronounce it. Microscopy. There we go. I knew I could do it. But part of how we study these type of allergens to generate a report, so you can see what you're doing. I think we're coming to the hutch here, so we only have a few more things to talk about. And we'll go ahead and ask our fourth question. We're trying to keep it simple and to keep it moving. And that is, air samples can be collected in a building to test for allergens. Air samples can be collected to be able to test for allergens. So that is a true-false question. We'll give you folks a little more time to look at it. It should be pretty easy to ascertain. We were just talking about it. Oh, yeah, you guys are doing great on this one. I didn't expect anything less. We'll give it a couple more seconds. The votes are coming in. And looks like everybody's in who's participating, and it looks like 90% of you got it correct. So I can share that with you guys. 90% got it correct. So good job out there. We only have a few more slides to present, and then we'll wrap up the webinar.
So this is a very interesting slide, because back in the laboratory, a lot of people ask, like, how good is good, how bad is bad. So after analyzing the sample, and we have done a lot of these kind of sample, this is like, non-culture method. If we take for the air sample or airborne stuff, then this is the result which we are experiencing, and it comes through our compilation of over, like, maybe like, over 25,000 different kind of analysis which we have received sample all over the country, and some of the sample also come from abroad. So this is the number which we proposed. And again, I want to underline here that this is not an universally accepted guideline. This guideline is being not endorsed by any agency, but Environmental Diagnostics Laboratory feels that this is on an average number one should have in their sample, because we have analyzed these samples, and from where we have derived this number. So this number is definitely driven and analyzed scientifically, but at this time no agency is recommending it, neither it is the international unit or international guideline. But still, I can say you with the confidence that a lot of industrial hygienists who uses our laboratory to practice on daily basis to make sure that your condition is hygienic, or you need some the action once you are topping the high number, as we have suggested. You can see on this table, which I can read, that the opaque particles should be less than 35,000 count per cubic meter volume of the air. The skin cells supposed to be less than 7,500 counts. Insect biodetritus should be less than 200 count. The fiberglass, fiber should be less than, including fiberglass, is not there, so fiberglass should be 500. The fiberglass fiber should be 5. Again, I beg your pardon, because fiber should be 500 and fiberglass fiber should be less than 5, because the fiberglass fiber itself is an irritant category, so that is not being compiled with the fiber. And pollen grain supposed to be less than 15 count, and fungal elements supposed to be less than 1,000 count, and others supposed to be, which include like various kind of particle, rust particle, black particle, yellowish particle, or any kind of debris which is not being identified, otherwise we put in the other. Their concentration should be less than 6,000 count per cubic meter volume of the air.
And yes, this is for the airborne samples that you would collect when you're doing your building investigation. And this is a very similar table, and this is looking at the surface.
So in the superficial sample, superficial investigation, we have compiled over 10,000 sample, and as a result we find out that the opaque particles should be less than 3,000 count, the skin cells supposed to be less than 600 count, the insect biodetritus is supposed to be less than 4 count, the fiber should be less than 120 count, the fiberglass fiber should be less than 4 count, pollen grains should be less than 4 count, fungal elements supposed to be less than 50 count, and that particular data is published, and it's published in a white journal, white reviewed paper journal. So that is a 50 count. Again, I repeat, fungal elements supposed to be less than 50, and others supposed to be less than 650 count. So these are the typical count if you analyze the sample using the non-culture method, and mostly the microscopy is one of the non-culture method which typically this laboratory uses.
So, to sort of recap the process, right? So you have occupants, they complain. These complaints grow to more than a few people. You decide to test for yourself with a do-it-yourself test kit that you can get through Grainger, Sylvain, Carrier Enterprise, or you would call us in our building sciences team to do a more thorough building investigation. All of these samples are collected, they're sent to Dr. Sahay's laboratory, where he does this analysis and a report is generated. How do we know what the problem is, and then how to go about fixing it or minimizing it if we don't get this kind of report? So this kind of report and analysis, and it's more comprehensive than this. It includes a glossary of terms. It outlines the methods that are used.
Yeah.
So this report, but these kind of charts will be on that report that shows that it's low or good, moderate, or highly elevated, where you should have to take action. So at that point, when you have a report in hand and the sources of the allergens have been identified, the amount has been quantified, how much is in the environment or in the space that's in question or affecting people, now we can go about making recommendations on how to reduce the exposure and minimize the risk. And so a lot of times this involves stepping up your housekeeping game, right? It means you want to pay extra attention to how well your cleaning crew is cleaning the office or the school after hours. And that might even include what kind of chemicals they're using to clean things with. That can put off VOCs that affect people in different ways. Another way, and the sort of modern way of doing things, is to continually monitor the indoor air quality that's in the building. So you constantly want to keep in touch with, what's in the air. Of course, as we talked about, HVAC systems, it can be both a source and a distribution point for these allergens. And so you want to make sure that you're performing routine maintenance, filter changes, routine cleaning, because this ensures proper ventilation. You want to make sure the air is exchanging every 15 minutes, that the air that's being replaced into the room is fresh and it's at the right temperature, it's at the right humidity. So we'll look at a few other things. That picture was a picture of our HVAC cleaning process, which we'll talk about in a second. When we talk about reducing the exposure, we kind of go back to proper ventilation, monitoring the indoor air quality. So that means observing and maintaining the appropriate temperatures in the building, observing and maintaining the proper relative humidity in a building. Those two things are extremely important, because if any of those go out of balance, that's when things, especially like mold, as we addressed in our webinar last month, really can start to proliferate. Of course, if you have a leaky window, if there's a leak in the roof, a storm event, and you get water into the building, you want to make sure your building is sealed and is not leaking anywhere. And of course, if you do get any kind of moisture intrusion, then you want to immediately address that water damage, because again, mold, bacteria can start to grow. Insects, they like it when it's damp. They get in there and start to use damp building materials as food sources, or will eat the bacteria.
Yeah, in other words, for minimizing all those risks, let me summarize that, 3 or 4 process we have identified is very effective. The first and obviously very simple is the topical cleaning, that use some eco-friendly disinfectant and clean your high touch surface area in homes and the workplace and other commercial building. That's pretty effective. The filtration, we keep repeating that the filtration, especially the HVAC system with poor MERV rated filter, are not good. So we need to put a filter MERV rated greater than 8 or so to just maintain the air quality, just by filtering out the foreign body or debris or allergen, and not let it go in the building air conveyance system. So that is another one. HVAC cleanliness is one of the integral part of the whole equation. Many times, out of sight, out of mind, we take air each day and every day, but we forgot that there is an air handler which is supplying air in our houses, and we not clean those. So it is highly encouraged. Actually, this company has a big role serving the customer out there, or any person who need the assistant to clean their HVAC, because this company has come with a head of game doing the what they call green process. The green process doesn't include any harsh chemical and things like that, but still it enhance the efficacy of the equipment as well as the life of the equipment. If we are talking about the HVAC, both like for the commercial ventures as well as the homeowner, but it has been proven for the commercial venture that this company help various customer of ours, which we cannot disclose the name at this time, but if should anybody need the entire process, Troy Raszka will be more than happy to send the information, such as we have program like New Life, Pure Steam, and Pure Duct to these are the program. So you can take advantage of one of these program if you have or should you have need of more thorough cleaning for minimizing the risk of allergen and therefore controlling the allergy on the occupant or on your worker to enhance the productivity and the quality of life you enjoy with a very small token of money that is really health based. So health is wealth. So I would highly encourage to look in from that angle, that if you are having any kind of problem, then get the risk minimized. That is the first step of the management of the whole equation.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And we're about out of time. So, and we didn't plan on going into great detail on these HVAC cleanliness solutions. Of course, we do have a building remediation sciences division who performs these, and you can go to our website, pureaircontrols.com, and look up any of these various services that we do, including going to our resources page, because we have a number of case studies and white papers that Doc has participated in writing that address these very issues and has scientific data to back up the efficacy of this kind of service. So, it's important that we take a look at that. Look, productivity suffers when folks are experiencing asthma and allergy symptoms, which impacts your bottom line. Of course, deferred maintenance, you think you're saving money, not, because these two equipment break, these kind of debris and detriment to the system. Hey, we're going to ask our last question, and we're going to wrap it up. You've all been doing really great on all of these questions, and we're happy that you've participated with us today. So our last question is true, false, HVAC cleanliness does not affect allergies in a building. So choose wisely. HVAC cleanliness does not affect allergies. True or false? So the poll's getting out there. We'll collect your results and then begin to wrap it up. But it does bear mentioning that you look at certain statistics like 1 in every 6 people that are suffering from allergies inside of a building are doing so because of the cleanliness of the ducts. So, you look at that kind of stuff and it really adds up. Hey, we're looking at 100% accuracy here on this one. And I'll share the results there. And there you go, 100% accurate. Well, that's great. Hey, listen, we want to thank you. We're finishing up pretty much on time, even though we got a little bit late of a start. We want to thank you for coming to this webinar today. Here's my contact information and Dr. Sahay's contact information. I want to tell you that as we conclude the webinar, there'll be a survey. So go ahead and participate in that survey. It helps us get a better feel for any sort of questions you may have moving forward with what we've talked about today and some of the solutions that we talked about today. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us here. We have recorded this webinar and it will be put up on our educational YouTube channel and on our website. So we'll send you a notification when that's done.
Yeah,
and I'd also like to mention that we have 4 or 5 handouts available today that you can download. Our capability statement, the overview of ED Lab, are 2 of the main ones. So if you like, you can download those. But
or
again,
anybody
thanks.
need the presentation or a copy of presentation, we will be more than happy to send the presentation. For that, you have to request an email. I read out the email. It's called as Troy T Raszka, that is T as in a Tom, R A S G as in a Jika, K and A as an apple at pureaircontrols.com. So should anybody need a copy of the presentation, please request via that email. Again, I repeat the email. That is T as in a Tom, R A S as in a Sam, Z and a Zika, K A at Pure Air Controls, all one word, .com. So please request a copy of the presentation should you need it, and then I believe that the Troy is going to be very prompt on sending those copy of the presentation in the PDF format will be sent to any of the audience should they choose to receive a hard copy of this presentation. Again, thank you very much for attending today's webinar. We always look for the topics. Should you guys have any interesting topic you want to know more about indoor air quality or indoor environmental quality, we are more than happy, or we are always welcoming new topics, and we'll seriously give a due consideration, and we can include those topics in our future webinar series. Remember, these webinar series are our extension program. We try to educate people. That's why we do all these series of webinar without any cost to anyone, just to make them aware that what is going on, what is latest, and how you can enjoy the quality of life. With these words, I'm Dr. Rajiv Sahay signing off, and hope to meet you in some future seminar. Thank you.
Thank you.